Growing potatoes in pots has been a real game changer for us. It's easier to plant them out, saves us space in the garden to use for other crops, and it's a lot easier to harvest the potatoes without having to dig them up out of the ground at the end of the season. And I think that growing potatoes in pots is a really easy way to get into growing your own potatoes at home. So I put together some of my tips to help you get started. So to plant our potatoes, we used 10-gallon pots, and we also drilled extra drainage holes because good drainage is really important for potatoes, especially since we're growing them in pots, and the pots that we have didn't have enough drainage holes in them. So in these pots for our potatoes, we used a 50-50 mix of potting soil and compost. So there's a couple ways you can plant the potatoes in containers, and it also depends on the type of potato it is. Some potatoes, when you plant them, they're gonna grow and produce potatoes really at just one layer. Other potatoes, they will produce kind of all along the stalk that comes up out of the soil. So depending on what kind of potatoes you have, that's gonna dictate how you might wanna put them into the pot. What we did was we put some potatoes down at one layer, piled on some soil, and made a second layer of potatoes and put soil on top of that, since we have enough room in these pots to do that. So there's one layer here at the bottom, and then another layer about halfway to maybe 2/3 up, and then we have that topped off with soil. Then for the potatoes that produce kind of all the way up, we only put them in the bottom third of the pot, and then fill the pot with soil from there. If you're wondering how many potatoes you can put in a pot, that's gonna depend on the size of the pot, and then also what you want to try to get out of the harvest. So fewer potatoes in the pot will get you larger potatoes. If you put more potatoes in the pot, you're gonna get smaller potatoes overall, but you might get more of them. So then after you have the potatoes planted, and once you get about 3 inches or so of growth, it's a good idea to mulch the tops of the pots. The mulch is going to act as a light block. It's going to help prevent sunlight from getting to the potatoes, which are developing and growing beneath the soil surface. Sunlight triggers the production of a compound called solanide. It actually acts as a defensive mechanism for the plant to protect against pests and disease. But solanide can make you really sick if you ingest it. So there's a few critters that you have to be on the lookout for: potato bugs, hornworm caterpillars, aphids, and slugs. One of the pests that's in the ground are wireworms, and we've got a lot of wireworms in our soil, and what they'll do is they'll burrow into your potatoes, and they can ruin crops of potatoes. We've actually lost a lot of potatoes in the past to wireworm. And so that is why we're growing them in pots, and the pots are elevated off the ground. So the wireworms, which are in the soil, aren't gonna get into our potato pots. Now that's all about pests. The next thing to consider are diseases like blight, and this can affect the foliage and cause dieback. So you don't want to overwater potatoes, particularly if you're doing this in pots, which is why the drainage is so important. And you want to make sure that you are watering them from the surface. Try to keep the water off of the leaves. And the other thing you can do is when you're looking for seed potatoes, look for ones that are specifically bred to be resistant to diseases like blight. Growing potatoes in pots has been a real game changer for us. So if you have any questions about growing potatoes, leave them down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.